inspirations, spotlighting gospel sensation. I'm some show. Motivation and inspiration for your eternal destination. I'm some show. Let's talk about it. It's the Mary W. Robinson Show.
Stay tuned for the Larry W. Robinson Show.
Celebrated media personality Larry W. Robinson presents Gospel Updates. Gospel Updates is the who, what, when, why, and where in the gospel music industry. Gospel Updates is a monthly magazine, weekly newsletter, video webcast, as well as a podcast. Gospel Updates has over 25 years of featuring people in the gospel music community. Gospel Updates magazine and the new Gospel Updates weekly newsletter document those who are continuing to help shape and write new chapters of this ever-evolving story of gospel. Go to www.gospelupdates.com. That's www.gospelupdates.com to get the latest issues. If you want to be featured, call or text 337-214-4046 or email gospelupdates@gmail.com for rates and details. Gospel Updates, featuring people in the gospel community for over 25 years.
You're listening to the Larry W. Robinson Show.
My guests today are David and Tiffany Spencer. They have a new song that I absolutely love. It's titled, It's Already Done. I've actually been making those kinds of decrees and declarations over my life. And so when this song came to me, I was like, yeah, this is going to be one of my new anthems. It's already done. And so I invited them on the broadcast today to tell you all about it. First of all, David and Tiffany, listen, praise him. We just go with it. He's worthy to be praised, and we're excited to have you on the broadcast today, in spite of challenges.
Thank you. Yes.
Glad to be here.
All right. Well, listen, David and Tiffany Spencer is a dynamic couple who are married under the bond of God's love and are dedicated to music and ministry. David and Tiffany were high school sweethearts who met during choir rehearsal. Their love for music brought them together. David had the beats. I love this. David had the beats and Tiffany had the harmonies. Isn't that wonderful? Right. Together, they developed chemistry and birthed a sound unique to their special bond. David and Tiffany launched their gospel music career and have built it as an opportunity to put their love for each other, music, and love for God on full display. They released their debut album, One Touch, in 2019. Their indie album laid the foundation for the couple's career and, listen to this, garnered them a 2020 Kingdom Image Award for Best Album of the Year, as well as a 2020 Rhythm of Gospel Award for Best Packaging. David and Tiffany's vocals were featured on many records, including Kim Cash Tate, Byron Walker, Ernest Pugh, Sherry Jones Moffett, Will Harris Fellowship Chorale, and many more. Now, James Patrick Stewart, an Emmy Award-winning nominee, featured the couple's sultry vocals on his record, Can You Feel Me?, which he performed on ABC's General Hospital. After all that, we could just give the benediction and go on and go home. Because, I mean, I love it. I love everything that they've accomplished thus far, and the fact how God just, put your marriage together for this time and this dispensation for such a time as this. So, again, David and Tiffany Spencer, welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you for having
us.
Mm-hmm. Listen, it's already done. I don't care what people are waiting on, what promise they have from God. They can rest assured that it's already done. Tell me a little bit about the birthing of this song.
Well, pretty much, we both grew up in Lumberton, North Carolina, which is an old country town. Most people probably don't know where it's at. It's near Fort Bragg base. But I grew up washboard, tamarines, foot stomping, clapping. Someone started a song in the back, and then everybody join in devotion service. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to do a song that kind of paid homage to that. And then just with everything going on in the world, it's easy to get discouraged when you're going through life and things aren't going according to your plan. But God has a plan. And so even when our plan doesn't align with his, we just got to hold fast that he's in control. And whatever he told us, even if it's not, we're not taking that direct path that we want, it's already done just because he said it. And so that's really the heart of the song. And that's what I wanted to embody when we put it together.
What are some things that, especially as far as your music ministry, that God has promised you and that you've seen come to pass? And so that you can rest assured that if he did that, he can definitely do anything that he has promised in the future.
Really, one of the biggest things I can say is that we've always been told that our music would, it's always been prophesied to us that our music would get out there, that people would hear it, and lives would be changed. And you hear different testimonies. I think even just our marriage in itself is a testimony for some, because we got married, I wouldn't say young, but we were young. And we've been together since I was 15. So, for that to be on display and for people to say, young marriages don't, they don't make it, and we do. And then we're actually in ministry together and we're doing music together. That's just something you don't see. And so just that our marriage, our music would be a light to the younger generation. And I mean, even some of the older folk.
So that you guys were high school sweethearts. How soon after high school did you get married? And then, of course, how many years have you been married now?
We've been married 11 years. That we just celebrated our anniversary on the 14th of May. But we started dating in high school and we got married a year after I graduated from college. So that 2011, we got married.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Any advice for young couples?
Communicate.
Oh.
Communicate.
Talk about it.
Yes.
And talk about it all. Like sometimes we'll have people will have things that bother them. Let's just put it that way. Things that bother them that they never communicated, that they never voiced and said. And so, 5 or 6 years down the line, when they talk about we have irreconcilable differences and I want a divorce, sometimes what the things that they want to divorce over, their spouse is hearing it for the first time. Like, really? And you never said?
Right. We always say discuss the good and the bad, because I think a lot of times people only communicate when they fuss. So when I'm mad with you, I'm going to tell you how I feel about you. And then the things that go well, you never have that discussion. So I always say communicate the good and the bad, because I mean, as you get older, you change. And your spouse needs to know the things that are, that you can't just physically see with the natural eye that have changed. They need to know that. And sometimes that almost always, that takes communication.
Wow. You said something. As you get older, you change. And sometimes the person, and if truth be told, we may not readily admit this, but the person that we were when we first got in a relationship is definitely not the person we're going to be. Even a year from now, we're a totally different human being.
Absolutely.
How do you first of all, do you think it's important for couples to understand that going in, like, we are this way today, but 365 days from now, we're going to be totally different humans, and we still are making a commitment to do life together?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. I mean, a lot of times people say, I'm a life learner. And if you're always learning, that means you're going to be growing. And so when you grow, you change. It's just a natural part of life. And so you're growing together. And that's the thing. You don't stop growing, you don't stop changing, you don't stop learning, you don't start adapting. And even some things, I know, like sometimes I say, hey, I'm flawed.
Did you say flawed?
Yeah, I'm flawed. I have my flaws. And so there's some things that I'm particular about, or I have a pet peeve about. It's unfair to her if I don't just put it out there, so she can, understand, okay, yeah, he might just act a little funny about that. So at least she know, and I know, that way we can work together, because we're in this thing together. You're two become one, but you still have your own individual personalities and things like that. So you just got to figure it out.
That's good. And so then for when the kids came in the mix, how did that, because those are humans with their own thoughts, ideas, and personalities. How did and then how did your children show you? You know what I mean? Like sometimes we think like, you know, I have learned that children have a way of showing us ourselves. And sometimes
Absolutely.
the worst things in ourselves, we see it in our children, be like, ooh. Have you noticed that yet?
Absolutely. I always say our oldest daughter acts a whole lot like him. They say she looks like me. I think she looks like him, but she acts a whole lot like him. But I think with kids in the play, it's always about balance, because we had our first child a year after we got married, you know, and for some people would say, well, why didn't you wait 3 and 4 years, or you should wait 3 and 4 years? But we had already been together 7 years, you know, so it was a little different. But as far as balance, it honestly still goes back to that communication piece, you know, because we both work. David is, I mean, for years, for most of our marriage, he's been a musician. And then up until recently, now he's gone into ministry. And so that's another balance, you know, balancing time and, you know, understanding that there is still a such thing as Tiffany Spencer and David Spencer, and knowing when you need your time, you know, and things like that. Because I think when people get married and they become parents, they forget that they're actual individuals, you know, and so that's important, and that's where balance comes into play, and being able to communicate that and like, hey, it's your night. Go ahead on, I'm going to bed tonight, you know, and you know, just things like that. So I always say communication with kids, it still goes back to communication, and then balance and knowing when you need your time, and then making sure they get their time.
You know what? It's so interesting. I was listening to a pastor preaching Sunday about being single, or about singleness. And one of the things he said is when God created humans, he created one human first. So that person, that one human, that first human had their own identity. And oftentimes, you know, he went on to say that oftentimes that we get into relationships looking for stuff like the Jerry Maguire movie, like they complete me and all that. No, you be whole and complete before you get into a relationship. Were you guys whole and complete before, or you were still figuring it out? Probably you were a little bit of
I think some aspects definitely help, but in some things, like I said, you're a work in progress, and so I think, and it still goes back to that communication and priority. As those priorities in your life shift, you got to communicate those, and you know, as your interest and everything shift, you got to be willing to say, hey, this is where I am now, and then you know, but I want to be there with you. So, you know, I think that's the biggest thing, is making sure you acknowledge that person, but then just acknowledge and be fair and say, hey, where can we compromise? Where can we meet in the middle on X, Y, and Z? And
see, we learned how to communicate, you know, because I think initially we thought we had it down pat, and we thought we, you know, had it together. But then over time, because I think I'm probably an over communicator, like I say how I feel in the moment. And when we first got married, my husband was more like, I ain't gonna tell you, I'm gonna wait for 3 months, and then when I finally do tell you, it's gonna be everything that happened in the last 3 months that I didn't like that you did, you know, which would be overwhelming for me, because, you know, I speak in the moment, he speak after the moment passed, you know, and so we learn how to talk in the moment. But also, I think it's important to learn your love language too. And a lot of people, marriages and couples, you know, they don't realize that. And honestly, we've been married 11 years, and I don't think your love language changed yet, but mine changed. Because when we first got married, I like to receive gifts, you know, and now I'm like, acts of service, wash the clothes for me, I love you forever, you know what I mean? And so, and with him, it's just touch, you know, he likes his attention, he likes his time. So, you know, I think that's important to. He said, I'm throwing him. The man said talk. So yeah, I think that was the part where, you know, we learned over time that even though things do happen, things change, as long as you communicate that, and y'all are, you know, that's the biggest thing.
You know what? I think that book that you're referring, well, I don't even know if you're referring to a book, but there is a book called The 5 Love Languages, and I think it's Gary Chapman. How important is it for people to invest in education like that? Because, you know, sometimes we just think we know, and it wasn't until, and you know, those 5 love languages are not just for relationships in terms of marriage relationships. They can be parent to child, you know, they can be best friend to best friend. You know, we need to just know How? And if you're in a relationship, I think you should at least invest in that relationship and understand each other. So married or not married, I think that's people should invest in literature that helps them understand themselves and communication. Like I took a whole summer course just on communicating. So how important is it I guess I went all around the merry-go-round and say, how important is it for people to invest in education as it relates to interpersonal relationships and relationships in general?
Well, I think it's very important. It's weird because I know yesterday we was talking. I was saying I had to preach Sunday, and I pulled out a bunch of books and I said, get you some resources, and so sometimes we're waiting for this, miraculous download. God he can give you a direct download, but sometimes the information he's already put out there and it's in a book, so you got to go get you some resources, the stuff you don't know, invest that time and go search out and get it that way. So, some things you're just not going to know unless you digest it from reading.
That's right.
So, I mean, everything. I know we say relationship with people, but even your relationship with God, give you some resources. I tell people all the time, I this is bad. I mean, I'll quote King James Version, but I remember, especially early on, that stuff used to put me to sleep. I'd be like, I don't understand it. I don't talk like this. And so I had to get me some research, get me some supplemental text, get me some just everything. Just so when you're digesting it, you can get a full understanding. So in everything, seek wisdom. And I think you'll be all right.
That's good. You know what I was and I guess I'm always listening to sermons, but I was listening to a sermon and, I don't know if you guys did, but when we were coming up every Sunday after Sunday school, we would quote 2 Timothy 2:15, study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not be ashamed, but rightly divide the word of truth. And so one time we was at a relationship conference and the guy mentioned that scripture. He said, y'all probably quoted this for Sunday school, but this can be applied to relationships too. Study to show thyself. I say, come on, a workman that needed not.
That's right.
And he said, and rightly divide. In other words, rightly divide the truth of relationships. So he kind of applied that to relationships, but I can see that being studying even in relationships is wise, very wise.
Absolutely.
But listen, really doing these conversations, I like to talk about faith and music. And of course, we've talked a little bit about the music. And of course, we talked about relationship. But I want to know how faith has played an important role in you guys' relationship and even your faith walk with your music.
I'm going to let you take that one.
Well, really, faith is the key, because I think even now, and I would say more so now, when we first started, we both had music and projects. And I know now we talk a lot amongst ourselves. I say, hey, where do you see yourself or what you're doing lines up with God's will for your life? And so I know you're a teacher, aspiring principal, but is this what God has designed and called you to be? And so I think the most fulfillment that I get is when someone calls me and says, hey, David, I was going through a rough time, and your song is the song I went to that touched my life, or I was listening to you guys and that really blessed me. Or a lady one time wrote us and said, I was ready to divorce my husband, but I saw you and I saw y'all love, and I went back and we wanted to try it again. And so those are the moments where I feel like, this is what God has really placed me on the earth to do, placed us on the earth to do, is to be a light and to use our gifts, use our talents to push people closer to him. And so in music, I tell people all the time, music is an investment. Yes, it ain't cheap. It's a time investment, it's sweat, and it's monetary investment. And so I believe, I don't look at it just a monetary investment. I believe we are sowing into the vision that God has given us, and then I believe that it's going to return. So not just putting this money out there, putting this time out there. I believe we're doing it for a reason. We're walking in the real will of God, and he's not going to let that seed come back void. And so I trust him, and I have faith that what we're doing is for a reason. And like I said, that reason isn't always we're going to get rich and famous.
Mhm.
It's those moments where this person's life was influenced in a positive way because of something that because of our obedience to what God told us to do.
I love it. I absolutely love it. You know what? First of all, thank you for joining me for this conversation. I really do love the song It's Already Done. And it's available at all streaming platforms now. Well, but how can even though the song is available on all streaming platforms, how can our listeners connect with you directly?
Well, we have a Facebook page that is David and Tiffany Spencer. We have two actually.
Okay.
And then we have Spencer Avenue. Spencer Avenue is kind of like that page where we put all the details in there first. So if you want the first dibs on things, then Spencer Avenue would definitely be the way. On our Facebook, like our personal pages, I'm Tiffany Tanae Spencer and he's David Spencer. We have a TikTok.
Come
David
on.
and Tiffany Spencer. Yes, David and Tiffany Spencer, and also Instagram, David and Tiffany Spencer, and our website is www.davidandtiffanyspencer.com.
All right. Well, listen, David and Tiffany Spencer, thank you so very much for being my guest today on the broadcast.
Thanks for having us.
Bless you.
Stay tuned for the Larry W. Robinson Show. Celebrated media personality Larry W. Robinson presents Gospel Updates. Gospel Updates is the who, what, when, why, and where in the gospel music industry. Gospel Updates is a monthly magazine, weekly newsletter, video webcast, as well as a podcast. Gospel Updates has over 25 years of featuring people in the gospel music community. Gospel Updates magazine and the new Gospel Updates weekly newsletter document those who are continuing to help shape and write new chapters of this ever-evolving story of gospel. Go to www.gospelupdates.com. That's www.gospelupdates.com to get the latest issues. If you want to be featured, call or text 337-214-4046 or email gospelupdates@gmail.com for rates and details. Gospel Updates, featuring people in the gospel community for over 25 years. You're listening to The Larry W. Robinson Show.
Robinson Show. They'll talk, give inspirations, spotlighting gospel sensation. Robinson Show. Motivation and inspiration for your eternal destination.